Hey, good morning to you. It is Sunday, February the 1st. I'm Ali Vellian, and this morning the Republican majority in the House of Representatives is shrinking. Texas Democrat Christian Meny won a special election last night to fill a vacancy in the Houston-based 18th Congressional District. When he's sworn in, Republicans will have just a 4-seat majority heading into a midterm election season that will find the GOP reckoning with a slew of deeply unpopular policies from the Trump administration. This seat sat vacant for a year as Texas Governor Greg Abbott took a record amount of time to call for an election in the deep blue district. In that 1 year, Congress has failed to serve as a check on Trump, and the congressman-elect has made his intentions for office clear. President Trump, my message to you is this: you've gone nearly a year without hearing from the people of the 18th Congressional District of Texas. Yeah. The results here tonight are a mandate for me to work as hard as I can to oppose your agenda. Yeah, to fight back against where you're taking this country. Yes, sir. And to investigate your crimes. Elsewhere in Texas, a state Senate special election in Fort Worth last night saw a stunning victory by the Democrat Taylor Remit. The veteran labor leader flipped a Republican-held state Senate seat in a district that Donald Trump won by 17 points in 2024. It wasn't even close this time, with nearly all the votes counted. The Associated Press had Remit leading by more than 14 points. This president's policies, from trade wars to tariffs to expired health insurance subsidies to foreign misadventures and the deployment of armed federal agents to American cities as part of his brutal ICE crackdown, are deeply, deeply unpopular. And come November, every voter who's unhappy with the direction that Donald Trump is taking this country in will be able to cast a ballot against his party and his agenda. But the way the news goes these days, November is a long way away. Hey, we're living inside a news cycle that feels repetitive and cyclical and overwhelming. A 5-year-old detained, tear gas canisters hurled into crowds, a mother and a nurse shot to death, the odd bombing of a foreign country, deposing of a nation's leader, toppling of a world order. But there is something that we can all do in the meantime, something that Americans are doing in increasing numbers. Until it's time to cast ballots against the cruelty and chaos that Trump is dispatching to American streets, communities are refusing to look away when their neighbors are targeted. They are using their voices and their bodies and their cell phone cameras to speak out and protest and bear witness and gather evidence. This weekend saw hundreds of protests against ICE across the country. Protesters marched on the state capitol in Madison, Wisconsin on Friday, and this was the scene in Los Angeles. A combination of activists, students, and families marching toward the same detention center that served as the epicenter for last summer's demonstrations. In Texas, Utah, North Carolina, California, Minnesota, and elsewhere, thousands of students participated in school walkouts to protest ICE. 10-year-old Nora told the Knoxville News Sentinel in Tennessee, quote, "People need to know that not only adults are noticing what's happening, kids are noticing too." In Portland, Oregon last night, federal officers used tear gas and other crowd control munitions on protesters who had marched to the city's ICE building. Oregon Public Broadcasting, whose photographer took these images, reported a mostly peaceful crowd, but ICE began confronting the crowd when some demonstrators blocked a security gate at the facility, and they used tear gas, which was then blown several blocks toward the back of the crowd, where it struck elderly people and children. The next No Kings protests are being planned for March 28th. Organizers there are aiming for 9 million people to participate across the country. Back on October 19th, that No Kings protest drew 7 million people. Now, you may still be thinking March 28th is some time from now, but your hands needn't be idle till then. Indivisible, one of the progressive groups organizing the No Kings protests, is also hosting webinars on how to safely document ICE agents as they move through the streets. In an interview with Mother Jones, Indivisible co-founder Ezra Levin said that 200,000 people attended a similar training this Monday, just 2 days after Alex Prey had been killed in Minneapolis while documenting ICE agents himself. Quote, "People saw a secret police force, assault and murder fellow Americans. And one natural response you could imagine would be people could do what the regime wants them to do, which is to be quiet and go home and not show up. But instead, we have, by several orders of magnitude, the largest number of people ever to attend a training to learn how to do exactly what Renee Good and Alex Prey were doing." And the Washington Post reported that 34,000 Motans have signed up to be trained as U.S. immigration and customs enforcement observers with various activist groups in recent weeks. Joining me now is Panel Joseph. He's the founding director of the Center for the Study of Race and Democracy at the University of Texas at Austin. Doctor, Joseph's work focuses on race, democracy, and civil rights. His most recent book is called Freedom Season: How 1963 Transformed America's Civil Rights Revolution. Panel, great to see you. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for having me, Holly. We're seeing the type of protests grow. On Friday, we saw an attempt at something that felt like a general strike, with hundreds of organizations across 46 states pushing people not to work, not to shop, or attend school. Talk to me about this. You've got a really good historical context on the effect of both protests and economic action to bring about change. Well, yeah, I think we're seeing extraordinary movement at the grassroots level, Ali. And I would say that this is similar to what occurred during the civil rights movement, but it's also similar to demonstrations and protests that occurred in the 19th century that were abolitionist protests. Protests against the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850. Protest against efforts to expand slavery in free states. We think about Kansas, Nebraska. And so these protests have continued, but we're seeing something really extraordinary in the aftermath of the Prey and Renee Good murders is really a national galvanizing moment. ICE has become the tipping point of really a far-flung authoritarian regime that has banned books, the destruction of DEI, attacks on LGBTQIA folks, and really an assault on the post-war liberal democratic state. So in a lot of ways, what we're seeing is the end of something, but we're also seeing the beginning of something which is something to be very, very excited about. I would agree with you. I'm sensing the same thing. I want to quote from a 2019 BBC article on how a protest movement can become successful. This is looking at hundreds of campaigns over the last century. Harvard researcher Erica Chenoweth found that nonviolent campaigns are twice as likely to achieve their goals as violent campaigns. And although the exact dynamics will depend on many factors, she has shown it takes around 3.5% of the population actively participating in protests to ensure serious political change. We've heard the 3.5% number a lot, but this is what it's about. 3.5% of our population would be 11.9 million people. The No Kings organizers are looking for 9 million people on March 28th. I'm actually hopeful that they'll get that and exceed that. But tell me about this. These are significant numbers. What does this mean to you that this many people are turning out to protest? Well, these are mass protests. We haven't seen this many people out in the streets since 2020 in the aftermath of George Floyd. And the data we have shows anywhere up to 25 million people went out in the streets. And certainly that led to a lot of solarking. There was some policy, and it led to the Biden-Harris victory. But as we've seen, those changes were not permanent. And so when I think about protests are historically contingent. So you have to have the institutional and political context where the change can take place. And that's where we're thinking about the Voting Rights Act of 1965, the Civil Rights Act of 1964. What we're seeing now is massive protests. But even if the elections in 2026 and 2028 go the way many people who are human rights activists and who hate to see what we're seeing, even if it goes in a positive way, what we're seeing, Ali, is that the institutions that we have, the courts, the Congress, but also at the local levels right now, they are not strong enough to enact the kind of change people, or at least over half the country, is desperate for. So what we're seeing is that we're presiding over, the Trump administration has presided over really the end of the post-war American liberal democratic order. That's very frightening, and it should be. The positive is the potential to create something new, to create a different political system where people's needs are actually met, and people are not demonized, whether people are Muslims, whether people are Jewish or Christians, whether people are 5-year-old undocumented. So I think we're seeing a movement calling for dignity for all people in the United States. And that goes back to Martin Luther King Jr. That's right. It goes back to the Poor People's Campaign. It goes back to really the best, most aspirational part of American history. But it's important for us to remember, no matter what numbers come out in the streets, because we're seeing the decline of institutions that we rely on. We can't be we can't guarantee our own safety and guarantee that there's going to be progressive change, because in 1963, when people went out on the streets, the institutions were strong enough to, one, not try to massacre people at the March on Washington, for instance, right? And the institutions were strong enough to carry out a transformed landscape of racial desegregation and integration of voting rights. And there were still, of course, martyrs like Medgar Evers, martyrs like the 4 little black girls who were killed at the 16th Street Baptist Church bombing. But the institutions were strong enough to usher in a new multiracial democratic order. And that's how you know Ali, me, and you are here. That's how you get Michelle and Barack Obama. That's how you get Oprah Winfrey, Michael Jordan. That's how you get Kamala Harris, right? But the institutions that allowed that to happen, that were radicalized for that to happen, those institutions, I would argue, not only are in decline, and we've seen it with the takeover of higher education, those institutions have been really have capitulated. We need newer, stronger institutions. So it doesn't mean that the infrastructure has to be thrown out, but we need a different mechanism for Congress. We need a different mechanism for whoever becomes the next president to safeguard the U.S. democracy. So somebody can't invade Venezuela. Somebody can't hold Greenland hostage. Somebody can't say that a former president should be arrested on Truth Social because that's what the president had just said. So when we think about these protest movements are really an effort to transform American democracy. But the institutions have to be strong enough to allow for that transformation. Otherwise, what we're going to see is just complete chaos. And I think what's so extraordinary about what's happening in the streets now is that people get the message. People realize that we are at a critical hinge moment in the history of America. And those of us who support multiracial democracy have to go out in the streets. It has to be nonviolent. But we have to understand that until the institutions gain enough moral and political strength to enact change, whether it's change they agree with or change they disagree with, we are still not going to be safe. Our children aren't going to be safe. Our grandchildren aren't going to be safe. And remember what's going on here now, Ali, is that whether you are a citizen or undocumented, you're being targeted by state-sanctioned violence. And this is why Dr. King's vision of a beloved community said that we all had dignity whether or not we had a passport or not. It was human dignity. And it was about having our neighbors recognize that human dignity in other people's children as well as their own. And what's extraordinary is that we're seeing that in real time right now in the United States. Panel, good to talk to you as always. Thank you. You shed a lot of light on these things for us. And I actually share your hope in this. And I think looking at this now as an opportunity to rebuild makes this a lot more exciting than simply protest. I'm a big believer in protest, but you're talking about something well beyond that. Thank you. Panel Joseph is the founding director of the Center for the Study of Race and Democracy at the University of Texas at Austin. Joining me now is a perfect person for this conversation, a congressperson, a freshman congresswoman, Kelly Marson of Minnesota, who I think shares our view here that the protest in the moment, Representative Morrison, is crucial and important and will need to continue for months to come. But there may be an opportunity, particularly after the midterms, to start what Panel was talking about, the rebuilding of our institutions in this country to suit our modern day. Absolutely. And that was a beautiful history lesson that Dr. Joseph just shared with us. And I love that he said these are obviously incredibly dark and challenging times in our country. But I love that he emphasized that he feels like this is the beginning of something, because I think that is really accurate. We are a big, beautiful, diverse country. And I think the reason that the American people are standing up and saying that this will not stand is because it ultimately touches all of us. We are a nation of immigrants. Everyone in the United States is either knows, is related to, loves, works with immigrants. And this attack on our immigrant communities and our communities of color in our country is the American people are just saying it will not stand. And I think the protest movement is growing. And I think I kind of share your optimism and goal that March 28th may exceed the goal of 9 million. Well, you know, when I think about you, I think about Angie Craig, who we talk to a lot. I think about Ilhan Omar. You are all stories of what America has become. Ilhan Omar was a refugee and an immigrant to this country. Angie Craig is openly LGBTQ. And you are a physician who wanted to get into Congress because of the assault on women's rights in this country. So you're all actively fighting for change. And I think people have to understand this is going on around the country. People are getting involved in politics or staying involved or moving into new roles to fight for this country of dignity, this more perfect union. That is absolutely true. And I want to share with you, I went to the Whipple Detention Center in Minneapolis yesterday to perform my congressional duty, to perform oversight there. My office has been flooded with stories of cruel and inhumane treatment inside of Whipple. As you recall, I tried to go with my colleagues, Representatives Craig and Omar, about 3 weeks ago. We were denied entry. And now they have put in a new rule that you have to give 7 days notice before you're allowed entry, which of course is ridiculous. I think about my work as a doctor when they're OSHA checks or JCO checks to make sure that you're following rules. They're surprise visits. They don't give you advance notice because it doesn't give you an accurate picture. So even with that advance notice, the conditions that I found inside were deeply, deeply troubling. I was able to speak with 2 detainees, and both of them had horrific stories. One had just been returned from Texas because for some reason she had been sent down there and was now in a cell back at Whipple again. The minute I opened the door to talk to her, she said, "They are treating us like animals in here. The women that are in this cell with me right now, we slept on a cold concrete floor last night. We were begging for a blanket. We were begging to be treated like human beings, and the guards were cruel and would not give us any help." The other woman I spoke to she and her husband had just been brought into Whipple yesterday morning, leaving their 7-year-old daughter with a friend. She'd been there for hours. She was unable to contact her daughter. She was sobbing. Her legs were shackled, as everyone's are in Whipple. And remember, this is with 7 days notice. I was, as a physician, very concerned about the conditions inside. There are no medical protocols. They told me occasionally a nurse is on site. There was no nurse on site when I was there. It's awful, Allie. And I think we have to resolve as Americans that every single person deserves human dignity. The front page of the Star Tribune, our hometown paper, who I have to shout out because they've been doing some unbelievable report about this huge headline, "No Humanity About the Conditions Inside This Whipple Building." And their excuse for these conditions is that it is a holding center. It's not a detention facility. So apparently people's rights don't begin until they are arbitrarily detained at thousands of miles away in Texas from Minnesota. This has to stop. I left more resolved than ever to do everything I can to get ICE and Border Patrol out of Minnesota. But I want to add quickly too, Allie, apparently Susan Collins was able to get ICE out of Maine. I care about the entire country. I want them out of my state, but I think all Americans deserve to have civil rights and to be treated with dignity. I think you're absolutely right. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for keeping us apprised of what's going on both in Congress and in Minnesota. Democratic Congresswoman Kelly Morrison of Minnesota. All right, coming up, Democrats just secured 2 victories in special elections in the state of Texas. How this might affect the balance of power in Congress and what it signals ahead of the midterms. There were 2 special elections in Texas yesterday that delivered boosts for Democrats at the federal and the state levels. Democrat Christian Meny won the special election runoff to represent Texas's 18th congressional district. Meny defeated the fellow Democrat Amanda Edwards because those were the 2 with the highest rankings going into the runoff. That seat has been vacant for nearly a year. It was previously held by the Democrat Sylvester Turner before he died last March. Democrats had been accusing Governor Greg Abbott of delaying this election to protect the slim majority in the House of Representatives. This seat is in an historically blue district in Houston. And since 2 Democrats are running each other against each other in the runoff, it's no surprise that a Democrat won there. There was more of a surprise, however, in the Texas State Senate election. The Democrat Taylor Remmett flipped the state Senate seat in an historically deeply conservative district. He defeated the Trump-endorsed Republican by 14 points. Donald Trump won that same district in 2024 by 17 points. Joining me now from Capitol Hill is MS Now's Jack Fitzpatrick. Jack, good morning to you. Both of these elections separately have major implications, not just for the midterms, but in the case of where you are right now, for the balance of power in Congress as well. Yes. Starting with the unsurprising result, there is an increasingly narrow majority now in the House. Christian Meny's election, and we assume a swift insertion into the House, being sworn in the very near future, basically takes House Republicans down from a 2-vote majority to a 1-vote majority. Currently, right, this second, Republicans have 218 votes to Democrats 214. That means they can, assuming everybody is there in town voting as expected, Republicans can afford to lose 2 votes and still have a functioning majority. When Meny is sworn in, that goes down to a 1-seat safe majority. That is especially significant with some close votes coming up to potentially end the current partial government shutdown. And then, as you mentioned, while that for the U.S. House is not a surprise result, very, very significant surprise result in the Texas State Senate, where Taylor Remmett flipped not just flipped a Trump seat, that Trump won that district by 17 percentage points, but did so quite easily, a 14-point margin of victory for RT. You can't necessarily transpose that roughly 30-point swing on the rest of the country and say that's going to happen for Democrats running for Congress. This is an unusual set of circumstances, a Saturday runoff for a special election, but it clearly shows some enthusiasm on the Democratic side and an effective campaigner from RT who focused very significantly on veterans issues, labor issues. He's a local labor leader within the International Association of Machinists, up against more of a cultural conservative. So definitely takeaways from both of those races that are significant for Democrats. Yeah, and that labor part is actually interesting. I'm going to be talking about that next hour, about the role of labor and leaning into labor connections for some of these candidates. Jack, good to see you. Thank you for joining us. MS Now's Jack Fitzpatrick on Capitol Hill. All right, coming up, the DOJ seized ballots from Fulton County, Georgia. The Attorney General is demanding voter rolls from Minneapolis, and Trump's brutal immigration crackdown is striking fear among citizens of American cities. The Michigan Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson joins me next to talk about why Democratic secretaries of state are preparing for crisis in November. All right. On one hand, you've got federal agents carrying out Trump's immigration crackdown in American cities. On the other hand, you have the president demanding that states hand over their voter rolls. On its face, there's no reason for you to make an obvious connection between those two things. But this is the Trump administration, so of course there is.